Thank you for having me back again, Vanessa. I'm really excited to be here today. Again, we want to turn the spotlight on you and ask you the questions that we're all wondering. We're talking about today the simple but powerful strategies we can use right in the moment to create calm for both teachers and preschoolers. Again, we always want to be grounded in research. In a spring 2024 study conducted by RAND, pre-K teachers reported job-related stress twice as often as similar working adults. So the problems are clear, but again, we come to you for solutions. We've talked last time about how pre-K is more difficult now than ever. Again, we don't want to be gripey. We want to talk about solutions. So one thing that came to mind as I was reflecting on this was the word mindfulness. Can you briefly explain what does that really mean in the context of early childhood?
So I think to me, Meg, sometimes when people hear the word mindfulness, they think woo, especially people of a certain generation, right? That it's not a term that they have in their long-term memory. But I think it means in this case of being mindful of your students and their emotional state and thinking about what you can do or say to support them and bring them back to a regulated state, right? In this case, this is what mindfulness is because you are a teacher and you need to be emotionally regulated yourself, of course, right? We can't help children move from dysregulation to regulation if we ourselves are dysregulated. So that's the really hard piece. And so I think that just being mindful of your students' emotional states, because of all the pressures we have, and as the study showed, we are more stressed than our K 12 peers, our K 12 colleagues, which comes as no surprise to me for many reasons. We'll share a link in the show notes to the study, which was shocking, but yet not shocking at the same time. So I really think we start with that emotional state and being mindful of our students.
Why do you think mindfulness strategies, it sounds like such a big word that adults kind of use, but why do you think they're particularly helpful for preschool teachers, right?
We're seeing more kids in our classrooms now that are dysregulated more than we ever have, right? So I've been around this block and I can tell you that back in the day, I had maybe one or two kids who came into my pre-K classroom who were what I would call, in today's terminology, dysregulated and needed extra support. Nowadays, it's not uncommon to have four, five, depending on the size of your class, six kids. And that's astounding. And that's a huge leap, right? And we talked in episode 1 about that. So if any of you out there listening or watching, go back and listen to episode 1 of this series with Meg, where we talk more about that. But I think that this increase shows us that we need to be more intentional about how we respond to dysregulated behaviors and support our kids in the classrooms as they learn how to regulate these big feelings and emotions that they're having. But yet again, it's so hard for us as teachers to. I feel like a good analogy would be like we're riding that lawnmower and we're trying to mow a huge lawn and we're trying to get to all the standards and get to all the things that we have to teach, right? But we keep having to stop because there's something in our way, a bump or whatever. And we have to remember that we have to stop in that process and take care of these things because we can't keep going straight forward and mowing that lawn if we don't take care of these things first, because it's just going to get harder and harder. And then we're going to be trying to mow rocks, if that makes any sense.
And these are the skills they need first. Like you always talk about precursors, right? We can't just move on to academics if this is where the learning needs to occur.
Exactly. So we can't ignore these dysregulated students and behaviors that we're seeing these days. We have to intentionally and thoughtfully address them.
So, what can teachers do in their classroom and you've talked about things that we can bring to the space. Can you talk more about the calm down corner and what that could look like?
Yeah. So I think that in the most recent years, over the last, I don't know, I'm trying to think, 5 or 6 years, we've seen a huge increase in this awareness of a calming area in your classroom, regardless of what you call it. There's so many different names that I've heard it called, but we're just going to use the calming area for this purpose because everyone calls it something different. But I think that it's actually been around for a lot longer then it's been a buzzword. So in my classroom, I used to have what I called the safe spot, which belongs to Dr. Becky Bailey in her body of work around emotions and dysregulation and all that. And so I used it in my own classroom. So I can say with complete honesty that it does work. But one of the things that we've gotten away from is understanding the true why behind the what in the purpose behind a calming area in our classroom. So it's not just another center, if you will, that we have that children can choose to go to. And I think that's become the big disconnect here is that it's actually a tool, a teaching tool that we use to support our students through these emotional dysregulation periods that they have. And so we're using it as a tool to support the high quality instruction that we're giving them in the classroom. So it's not everyone can go to the calming corner, whatever they want. I think that it's more of an intentional, mindful purpose that we're using it for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's going off of that. What can you walk us through a simple calm down corner exercise, something short and effective for preschoolers that teachers could take away today that oh, I could teach that right away in the school year and my students could use that.
I think one of the things that comes to mind for me right away, and it's super easy to do, and that I used in my own classroom, is a pinwheel. And pinwheels seem so old school, right? We're just like, what is that something my grandma put in her garden? So I think that they actually can be very useful in the classroom when used with intention and purpose. And I think they need to be sturdy too, because I have tried using the really cheap ones that you see out in the stores right around like the 4th of July or something that
Right.
is like tin foil.
Right.
Those will fall apart after use. You want like a nice quality, sturdy one. And they don't break the bank. Pinwheels are not $1 million. You know what I mean? But a pinwheel is one thing that comes to mind for me. So what we do with that is we focus our breathing, right, on blowing the pinwheel. So instead of the whole that children get into when they're dysregulated, like the heaving of breaths. They can't calm down. Their breathing is out of sync. So we can just focus on breathing in and blowing the pinwheel, whether that's real or imaginary. Kids are at this age, we know for a fact that they are in that stage between the ages of what, 2 to 7, or even 3 to 5, where they believe in imaginary things, right? That's why they believe that puppets are real. And that's why they believe that these characters they see on the screen are really talking to them. So why not use a pretend pinwheel if you have to?
Right. If you're getting a kid off the bus or you're in the hallway or whatever, right? You can always use this strategy.
Right. And it can even be, if it makes more sense to you, you can use the blowing of the petals on an imaginary flower, right? Breathe in. Let's blow the petals on a flower off or something like that. But blowing an actual pinwheel is a very good visual for kids, right? We have to go from the concrete to the abstract. So I wouldn't go to the imaginary pinwheel until I had already used a real one to model and demonstrate with the kids and then invited them to do it themselves. They have to experience it in the real world before they can actually pretend to do it, usually. So we're going to breathe in and we're going to blow the pinwheel. And then you can move to the imaginary. Imagine you have your own pinwheel, or imagine you have a flower. You're going to blow the petals off, right? And you can use visuals that work really well. And we do have
Maybe,
some of those visuals.
yeah, I was thinking about that. We know that breathing is so regulating. However, if you tell someone or even try yourself to just breathe when you're upset, right, it's difficult. And I think giving that little piece of novelty in a concrete object really makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Going forward, what's your favorite mindfulness technique for teachers to use themselves when they're feeling overwhelmed? Because I think one of the things I love about Dr. Becky Bailey and you is you talk about what is it really like for the teacher? What is it like for the adult? Because it can be dysregulating for an adult to see a child become dysregulated.
So, my first thing that I always try to remember as a teacher is that I have to take deep breaths myself before I can actually help that child move to a state of regulation, right? So I can't just react immediately because my immediate gut tells me to just shut this down. This is whatever is happening to upset the child, right? Or to fix the problem for them. We have to give them the tools they can use on their own because we're not always going to be there to help them in those dysregulated states. So definitely remembering that taking deep breaths or anywhere from 60 seconds before we jump in, I think is completely acceptable. So we've all had that year where we have a bunch of dysregulated kids in our classroom, whether that be 4 or 6 or whatever it is. And I think that what helped me the most was, instead of jumping in immediately when I saw these behaviors starting, was to just take a brief pause. That's 60 seconds is very brief. You can make it shorter if you want to, but just taking that minute to say, okay, I know where this is going. I've been there before with this child, and I know we have some tools and strategies, we meaning me, some tools and strategies that I can use to help this child move back to a regulated state. And I can do this. I can do hard things, right? And I have those tools to use. And so, one thing that comes up to mind for me is the teacher talk cards that we have in the Seeds of Success curriculum. And Meg, I know that you have used these. Tell us about that.
Uh, For me, in the moment, it's harder just like for the kids, it's hard for me to remember the words to say, right? So, for me, it's helpful if I have the words on a ring and I notice your face looks like this. Are you feeling? And try to get the language back to myself. It helps me know what to do if I just have this on a hook right near the calm down spot or where I know where they are. And it's a script for an adult. And I love having it on a small piece of paper. So it's not overwhelming even for me. Just, oh, this is a great strategy that works 90% of the time.
I really like the teacher talk cards, because I know for me, and perhaps for you too, Meg, is that when we see kids get in that dysregulated state, we can also become dysregulated quickly and forget all the words we ever wanted to use. And so these provide you with the words you can use. These are techniques, these are words that you can actually say. You just have to remember what the child is showing on their face. I
Right.
noticed that your face looks like this. Make that motion on your face. Maybe you're feeling like this, and then you can go into strategies to support that child. And I just want to be mindful of this too. We're never ever going to go in when a child is at the peak of their dysregulated state. We're
Right.
never going to go in and try to solve the problem at the
Right.
peak of we have to realize how to notice when they're becoming dysregulated and go in at that point. Because if they get to the state of complete dysregulation, you're just going to be putting out fires at that time. You're going to need to be keeping everyone safe, keeping that child safe. But if they're already at the point where it's a full blown thing, then you're just going to need to put out the fire. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
So you're saying we really need to notice what's happening with children kind of before it gets too big. And if we can't, then maybe taking a pause and maybe just breathing ourselves and noticing until we have to pick the right time. It's really the timing is key where you can't go when the emotion's at its biggest.
And I think that it's important to remember at the beginning of the school year too, that we're not going to know where the child's peak is. We're not going to know when they're starting to become dysregulated because we don't know the students yet. So if you're watching this and it's back to school season, then just keep that in mind, that you might not know, but you're going to learn, right? If that
Right.
child is consistently in a dysregulated state, you're going to start to notice those triggers, or there's those time periods. Is it transition time, or is it when it's time to go to lunch, or is it what time of the day are they getting into these dysregulated states? And then you're going to notice the signs that they're showing you. So you really have to be quite the detective and be very mindful of each and every student and their triggers, right? It's just so important. And you're going to learn those over the course of the first 4 to 6 weeks. I always say that by the sixth week, I usually can tell. The
So you're
students.
saying our first job is to be an expert kid watcher and make sure that we're learning the patterns of children so that over time we can solve these things before they get too big.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was meaning.
So, what would you say to teachers who feel skeptical about introducing a calm down corner? They're worried maybe their students might overuse it or misuse it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make, because it is not a calm down corner is not an if you build it, they will come scenario. It is not that. It's all about how you introduce it to your kids. And so that leads us to the next question, in my mind, would be, how do I do that? How do I introduce it to my kids in the right way so that I can make this work for me instead of it being a free for all or all the kids going there all the time or trying to escape. I've had some teachers say that their kids escape to the calm down corner when they don't want to clean up or when they, and I think that we just have to remember it's all about the intentionality and the purpose, right? So we're not going to, and this is really important to remember, especially at the beginning of the year when we're setting up our classroom, is that plastering the walls from floor to ceiling with a bunch of posters that we printed out is not helping anyone. It's just making more work for us, right? So I would rather have a completely empty area, just a few pillows and a rug, even are fine. But I never would put anything out there until I had explicitly, as the teacher, introduced it to the students, its purpose, its use, how to use it, and how not to use it. Because a lot of teachers also say to me, Meg, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that when kids get to that dysregulated state, right, they just throw the things in the calm down area. So we're going to start with the pillows and the rug because if they throw either of those things, it's going to be okay. We're not going to have any of our hard work go to waste. I've had teachers tell me that they spent all summer creating these calming bottles and all these great, buying all these great things. And then the kids just broke it right away. First of all, release yourself from that feeling of failure because it's everyone has been there and done that. We all have. But also just remember to be more intentional and purposeful about how and when you introduce things. And so, how do you do that? Right, is what everyone is thinking. And this is where I say again, and I don't want to overstate this, but I do want to let people know that the sort of success lessons that we have inside of right now, inside of Trailblazers, walk you through step by step on how we introduce these materials to our students. So, when do you give them a breathing strategy? And then how do you support them using that breathing strategy in your calming area? And then how do you introduce a yoga pose and how do you support your kids? And when do you do that in the calming area? It actually, for those people who need that structure, right, and that support, and this could be new teachers, it could be teachers who are new to this calming area type of thing. It could be veteran teachers who are looking to make a change in what they're doing. Anybody really who teaches young children, but it's going to absolutely walk you through step by step how to do that so you can have a successful calming area in your classroom that doesn't actually create more chaos and work for you.
Right, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. How would you roll it out, the calm down area? How would you teach it to children initially?
So, one of the things I like to do is in my social stories, also from the Seeds of Success, it actually will talk them through not only to identify the feeling and emotion they're having and to tell them that it's okay to have these feelings and emotions, but it also walks them through the strategies that we're introducing to them that week in the curriculum, because there's one social story per week. And then in the lessons, it tells you, okay, once you've introduced this strategy in the book, now we're going to introduce the strategy to them, whether that's a poster or a card or whatever we're going to do. And we walk them through how to do that together as a group, not just here's a card, look at it. Here's an actual, here's the thing, and here's how we use it. And
Right.
now it's going over into the calm down area. And we actually talk about how you walk it over and you place it there and say, so when you are feeling X, then you can go over here and here is the tool that you can use. And you can use it in the way that we just did together in a whole group. So that is actually how they're introduced to kids. And then each week we walk through different ones. So you're not plastering the walls as the year goes on. You are actually switching out resources. And then there's smaller versions. Since the kids have
Right.
quote unquote learned it, they have these smaller versions on cards or in a basket on a ring or however you want to do that is up to you. But they have those tools available to them.
That's just so helpful, and I think like what you said is just switching things out. So you can do that with the Trailblazer resources, and even I like to do it with what's in the countdown basket, so it's novel and new, but also doesn't pressure me to go get a million things for the countdown basket, and just focus on a few high quality things, like you were saying, like, we don't want things that can be that they're having real emotion when they're there, let's say, put it that way. So, we don't wanna have something that's fragile or I a big fan of a bargain, but this is maybe the place I invest in just a couple of things and also incorporating some of your tools in there as well. So, for teachers who are new to the calm down corner, what's one simple step they could take tomorrow morning to begin mindfulness in their daily routine?
I like that question because it's always small steps that we take towards progress. And so there are very simple things you can do right away, whether you have space or not in your classroom for a full blown calm down area. Because I have been there and done that, believe me. You can actually just put some things in a little basket or a crate, right? As you introduce them, of course. So you're not going to start day one with this basket of stuff because you haven't introduced it yet. And you don't want to slam your kids with all of these things in the basket right away because that's too overwhelming. We're talking about abstract concepts here. So we definitely don't want to get into abstract concepts before we've gotten to the concrete. So definitely think about that. But just a basket, or I had this little file crate that they sell sometimes at back to school. It was mini, right? So it's a little mini file crate and it fit on a shelf. And so I had that little shelf near me in my circle time area, and I could just offer it the basket or they could go and grab it once they understood that this was something they could use. And then just go to a little carpet clear or something that you have. It doesn't have to be a full blown area. And I think that you could also use cards from the Seeds of Success curriculum. And you've had some experience with that, Meg, right?
We have the little breathing rainbow. You can put the child's name on each one. And this is great to do in class and then send these home. This what says calm your body and you're breathing out and then you're breathing in and then calm your heart, calm your mind and have the little picture of each one. I was thinking this is probably what I'm going to put in my calm down kit at school, have it laminated nice and safe. But for practice and small group, I was thinking this is a little bit of clear slime in there, right? And
Nice.
so you can have the multi-sensory experience when you do it. I put a little packing tape across the top. Again, I wouldn't give this to a child when they're dysregulated, but I think sometimes if we can use multiple senses, kids love slime, and I'm not a big fan of giving kids slime in the classroom, but if it's in this nice safe baggie, I could handle it. And then they can have it stick in their memory a little bit more when we're practicing. So then when they are upset, you can give them this could be in the calm down basket, laminated and fully ready for use.
I think that's a brilliant idea because it's something I never thought of, first of all. And I love new ideas. But actually, when you're introducing it, to use those little gel bags, right? So you laminate the card, you put it in the little gel bag, and now they practice it in small group with their finger. They can feel, right, how the finger moves over the arc of the rainbow. I love that. That's a great idea. Yes.
Before we go, can what's the single most important takeaway about the countdown corner you'd like our listeners to remember?
I just want to reiterate it's not a place we send kids to.
Right.
It's not like a replacement for old school timeout, right? Where we would send them to quote unquote think about their behaviors. And I don't know the exact number of children who ever actually did that, but I think it's close to zero. Because if I go to timeout, I'm thinking about how mean this teacher is and how much I hate school, not about what behaviors I just did. So, yeah, I don't think it's a place we can send kids to. It's a tool. It's a tool to support social emotional growth and help them move from dysregulated states to regulated states. So it's a teaching tool, really. And I think that it can absolutely be used at home in as well if it's used in that intentional way as a teaching tool.
And you've made these resources, many of which the rainbow can be sent home along with the parent letters that you have already ready to go. So that's just another homeschool connection that parents can they want to help. A lot of times they have an oldest or an only preschool child and they haven't come across these big emotions before and they're a little bit lost too. So if we can give them some guidance, I love that that's all ready to go for teachers here.
That brings me to the end of our time together today. I just want to thank you, Meg, for joining us again in this series that we have going this summer all about social emotional learning. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Vanessa. This is always a privilege. And I always want to know what your story would be, what your thoughts would be, and how you come to some of these conclusions. And I always want to emulate what you do. So it's just such an honor to be able to ask your opinion on these kind of hot topics for teachers.
I enjoy it so much and I enjoy helping teachers regardless of where in the world they teach. I just want to remind everyone that until next time, I'm Vanessa. This is Meg. Onward and upward.
Thank you.